What's up, frog lovers? Today I'm going to be showing you the ins and outs of this amazing Osgiliath board, as well as talking about the design choices and how it came to be this board you see in front of you today. Now, I haven't posted a video in quite some time, and the reason for that is I've been pouring all of my energy into my other YouTube channel, which is a traveling channel that I've just made. It's called Where the Meadows Go, so if you would like to follow that, I will put a link up here and you can see all the adventures I've been going on. But it is really good to be back in this space, and I'm going to be creating lots more boards in the near future. So if you like stuff like this, please stick around. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So the first thing I had to figure out when I wanted to build an Osgiliath board was the size of it. A standard Middle-earth board is 4x4, which is 2/3 of this. I've gone a little bit bigger and gone 6x4. The reason for that was I wanted to include the river. Obviously, you can't have an Osgiliath board without a river. So I decided to make an entire 2x4 piece as a river board. And it kind of has its limitations. Obviously, being resin, it's really heavy, and in terms of gameplay, you can only really use the boats. And then the next problem was, if it's a linear board, you can only play one scenario really, and then all the buildings up the back are never gonna get used. So I thought we need to make the board modular. Now, normally making a board modular isn't that hard because you just have to join, mountains or whatever you have on the land so it fits multiple directions, if that makes sense. But because I have water, this was a very big issue. So I decided what I was gonna do is I was gonna have the river be a modular piece so that you could turn it and fight through the very middle of the city. Let me show you how it's done. So now, instead of starting at one end and having to fight all the way to the other long end, you can launch straight into the center of the map. And now all of these buildings have a lot more purpose. You can have objectives up here and it's actually reachable for both teams. It just has a lot more dynamic elements. Now, the way I got around this is up on this high end here, I put a higher platform and I've put a stone wall all the way along that to kind of act as like a bit of a dock sort of situation. So it has some moldy green stairs here. And the idea is that it looks kind of like where you would just put up like a trading ship or something. So it does actually make sense having the water like cut off in such a straight line there. And I think it works. So something else I had to consider when building such a large board like this was the structure of it. So it has to be strong enough to withstand multiple games. It has to be hard materials. And I had to do this really big resin pour, which is about 4 or 5 liters of resin. So in order to do that, the water board, I have put a pine frame around the entire border, and then I had to completely seal that off, make that as resin proof as possible. So the only sides that would be unprotected in this position would be that far side. So the majority of these boards is based with XPS foam, and then I've built that up with plaster, grout, rocks. I've done a ton of brick carving to make these like foundations all look symmetrical and match with the 3D printed buildings. So then we've used plaster for all the roads and all the stones. And then we've used a ton of grout to lock everything in and solidify it. And then I've used about 10 coats of sealer and glue and resin to lock everything down as strong as possible. So this board should last a very, very long time. So choosing how to make the board modular was definitely the hardest part of the whole build, just because you have to make it look good, but also it has to be practical. Gameplay was another huge factor when it came to the design of this board. It needed to have tight areas with lots of stairs for close quarters fighting, just like in the films. But I also wanted open streets so trolls and horses could also be used. Another main focus was placing the buildings in shooting range of each other, also facing windows over the main streets where objectives might be, to encourage players to use all areas of the board. Now, one of my favorite things about this entire project is that because I 3D printed all of the buildings, they all come apart and they all have playable interiors as well, which is just so amazing, because when you're building things out of XPS foam, a lot of the time it gets quite complicated to do interiors with the structural integrity of the building, also how to paint, and then having to play with models, things just get damaged a lot easier. So with these buildings, I can quite simply just take each level apart and then they all clip together. So you can easily have a game on every level of this building and then put it all back together when you're finished. Which is another huge factor that I love about storage and transportation of this board. So with all the structures being 3D printed, I had to make a pretty important decision, and that was to attach the base of every building to the board. And the reason I did that is because I didn't want to make the board really flat so that the buildings could be put anywhere. I wanted it to be a really dynamic cityscape that looks really realistic. So in order to do that, I had to dump heaps of rocks and heaps of bricks everywhere. So the buildings needed to be set in stone in one spot. When I was thinking of color for this board, obviously it's really hard to break up just the huge flat gray profile that you've got with a city like Osgiliath being rubble. There's also not a lot of roofs. I've only got one building that isn't a destroyed building there, so it's the only little bit of blue that you can see besides like the little tiny fractions of it. So I wanted to try to add a whole bunch more color wherever I could. So as you can see, I've put a ton of moldy, grimy little plants growing up the buildings. I've got algae in the waters. I've got algae in the ponds. I've also done a whole bunch of fallen leaves everywhere. As you can see up in this courtyard, there's a broken tree. So I like to give that like vibe that it used to have, like lots of bushes and things like that. And now it's all broken, but the leaves have still kind of scattered and been windswept throughout the city. So in a lot of the corners, I've put little piles of leaf litter, and I think it adds a huge aspect of color to the board overall, and little tufts of grass. I've used 4 or 5 different colors of grass. I was really mindful to put the greener colors of grass in the wetter areas of the board where like the water would run and the shade would sit. And then in the big open streets, I've just used like the most weedy looking grasses, the browns and the light greens. And I think all these little elements really bring the whole thing together. So something I love about this bridge was that I printed the destroyed version of it because obviously I didn't want it to look too intact, and it's Osgiliath, it's supposed to be broken, but I also wanted it to be playable. So what I did is I built a whole bunch of these balsa wood pieces, and they go straight along the bridge like this. Little piece up here that can then slot in. So then players can stand up here while they're shooting down into the city. I definitely think if you're interested in making a board, something like this, definitely try to go over all those elements that I talked about. Think a lot about the design, think a lot about what you want to get out of it in terms of gameplay, not just one specific board. Think about whether or not you want your terrain to be removable or whether you want the hyper-realistic elements as well. There's a bit of a balance on all areas, and it does take quite a lot of trial and error, sorting things out. I think I probably had maybe 15 different layouts before I settled on this one. It is truly a very cool board, and it has so many awesome features. I'm very proud of this design and also the durability of it. I think it's been my best board that I've ever made by a long shot, and I'm really, really happy I could be so inspired by the Arkenfell series. If you guys like 3D printed terrain and want to grab some for your tabletop, then please go check out our brand new website. I will put the link down below. It would mean the world if you could go check it out, as we've spent a long time creating it. And all the proceeds go towards funding big projects like this and supporting our local gaming community. So I would love if you could see all the stuff we've been working on. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that because it really, really helps us out as a small channel, boost out to those people who want to see content like this. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.